Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. Today, we're going to try to unpack a really knotty problem, and that's the and the National Treasury's kind of attempt to fix it with this ESCOM debt relief program.
Right.
We've got the latest update from the 2025 budget review right here, and we're not just looking at the raw numbers, right?
Yeah.
We want to get into what are the real challenges here, what could happen if this goes wrong, and what's the National Treasury actually up against? Because, when municipalities are hurting and ESCOM's in the red, it's not just some theoretical economics problem. It hits all of us
Right.
through, the services we depend on, right?
Yeah,
Or electricity and the national budget. So
Absolutely. And what's really striking right off the bat is just how much debt we're talking about.
Mhm.
I mean, that jump from 74.4 billion rand owed by municipalities to ESCOM in March of 2024 to 94.8 billion by December. That's not just like a little bump. That's huge. It really makes you think about what's going on underneath to cause that.
Okay, 94.8 billion. Let's just sit with that for a second.
Yeah.
Why is that kind of debt such a big deal specifically for ESCOM?
Yeah.
Owing money's one thing, but what's the actual impact on the ground?
Think about it this way. ESCOM needs money coming in constantly to do things like operate power stations, maintain the grid, and make these big upgrades to prevent breakdowns.
Right.
So when they're not getting a big chunk of the revenue they're expecting, because municipalities aren't paying their bills, it throws their whole financial plan out of whack. They can't pay their own bills, and that could lead to even more problems with keeping the lights on. And in the end, if ESCOM gets into a really bad spot financially, who has to step in?
Right.
The National Treasury.
So it's like a domino effect, right?
Exactly.
Municipalities can't pay ESCOM, ESCOM struggles, and then the national budget, which is already stretched thin, has to bail them out, which could mean less money for other important things.
Exactly.
And when the budget review talks about an already overburdened fiscus, it's not just a statistic, it sounds like a real warning.
Absolutely, and that's exactly what led to the introduction of this municipal debt relief program back in March 2023.
Right.
The idea was to give struggling municipalities a chance to kind of reset by basically writing off their ESCOM debt gradually over 3 years.
Okay.
The National Treasury's main goal was to help those 71 municipalities that signed up and try to stabilize local government finances.
So it was like a lifeline, but I'm guessing it wasn't just a free pass?
No, not at all.
There were some conditions attached?
The National Treasury was very clear about what these municipalities had to do to keep getting that debt relief.
Right.
The big ones were they had to collect at least 85% of their own revenue.
Okay.
They had to set prices for their services that actually reflected the cost of providing them, what they call cost-reflective tariffs.
Oh, right.
And they had to make sure that those free basic services only went to households that were officially recognized as indigent.
Okay, so basically run your municipality well, charge appropriately for services, and target support to those who genuinely need it.
Exactly.
Makes sense in theory,
Yeah.
but the fact that the National Treasury was already worried about municipalities not complying kind of suggests that putting those ideas into practice isn't so easy.
That's a really sharp observation.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the 2025 budget update shows those early worries were justified.
Uh-oh.
The National Treasury's report points out that a lot of municipalities just haven't been paying their monthly electricity bills. And maybe even more concerning, many of them aren't hitting that 85% revenue collection target. That's a problem. It really makes you wonder, what's behind this inability to collect revenue? Is it problems with the billing systems, a lack of enforcement, or are there deeper socioeconomic issues at play in these areas?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
And what happens if they don't meet those targets?
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like it's just a slap on the wrist.
No, the consequences are pretty serious.
Yeah.
The report says that a lot of municipalities, 47 to be exact, have consistently failed to meet the conditions and have actually racked up even more debt to ESCOM on top of the relief they already got.
Wow.
Which totally defeats the purpose of the program.
Yeah.
So for these municipalities, what could happen? They could be kicked out of the program immediately.
Right.
They might have to pay back all the debt that was already written off, plus the new arrears.
Oof.
And they could even lose out on crucial funding in the future through these medium-term revenue and expenditure framework grants.
Oh, wow.
Imagine the impact on their ability to even provide basic services if that happened.
It would be devastating, really push them over the edge.
Exactly.
And it's not just the National Treasury that can take action, right? ESCOM has some options, too.
Oh, absolutely. ESCOM can definitely take matters into their own hands. They can go to court to try to recover the money they're owed,
Okay.
And they can implement these prepaid bulk electricity systems,
Right.
which means municipalities have to pay for their electricity up front, which could have a big impact on residents, especially if the municipality is already struggling financially.
Right. Like imagine suddenly your electricity's cut off because the municipality didn't pay the bill.
Exactly. And the fact that the National Treasury has issued final warnings to specific municipalities like Mango Metro, Richtersveld, and Nsubia-Themba really shows how urgent the situation is for them.
Yeah, it sounds pretty dire for a lot of these municipalities.
Yeah.
But is the National Treasury just like cracking the whip here, or are they also trying to help these municipalities get back on track?
No, they are trying to provide support. They're not just punishing. They're offering monthly assistance, keeping a close eye on whether municipalities are meeting the program's requirements, and really pushing for these smart prepaid meters as a way to improve revenue collection.
Okay.
They're also thinking about stepping in more directly in those municipalities that are consistently failing,
Mm.
which suggests they realize some of them need more than just advice.
So it's kind of like a carrot and stick approach.
Exactly. Help them if they're willing to help themselves, but serious consequences if they don't shape up.
So we've heard a lot of concerning news, but were there any bright spots?
Yeah.
Any examples of this program actually working?
Yes, and it's important to highlight the successes too.
Absolutely.
The National Treasury says 11 municipalities have actually met the program's conditions and have had a third of their ESCOM debt written off,
Oh, wow. That's great.
which proves that the program can work if municipalities are able to meet the requirements.
Yeah.
It's a real-life example of how financial stability at the local level is possible through this framework.
So there's hope.
There-
But what's interesting is we don't know exactly how those 11 pulled it off, right?
Right.
Like what were their strategies? What specific factors help them succeed where others haven't?
Right, understanding that could be incredibly valuable for the municipalities that are still struggling.
It's like find the ones who are doing it right and figure out what they're doing differently.
Exactly.
So for those municipalities still facing these challenges, what's the takeaway from the National Treasury? What do they absolutely need to do?
The message is loud and clear. They need to step up their game
Yeah.
big time and actually meet the obligations of the debt relief program.
Okay.
And that means getting serious about those cost-reflective tariffs, even if it means making tough decisions,
Right.
making sure those free basic services are managed well and not being taken advantage of, and really going for those smart prepaid meter systems to improve revenue collection and become more financially stable overall.
So basically, get your financial house in order.
Exactly. Take concrete steps towards fiscal responsibility.
So it seems like the big challenge here is finding a way to both deal with this huge municipal debt to protect ESCOM and the national budget,
Yeah.
but also recognizing that a lot of these municipalities are facing real difficulties meeting the conditions of this debt relief program.
Absolutely. It's a tough balancing act.
And the potential consequences for those 47 municipalities that just can't seem to get it together are huge.
Yeah.
And their struggles have a ripple effect on the whole country, on essential services, and South Africa's overall financial stability.
Right. It shows how interconnected everything is, how financial mismanagement at the local level can create problems for the whole nation.
So this deep dive leaves us with a big question for you, the listener.
Hmm.
In the long term, how can South Africa create truly sustainable local governance? One that supports struggling municipalities,